Good evening and happy St. Patrick's Day, and welcome to the first of two Inside Government shows produced for the spring 2022 semester here at CU Community College and broadcast on Verizon Fios, Spectrum, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, that's run out of the Auburn Public Theater, and Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have in our studio today our first guest, who hasn't been here for a while because every time we've tried to schedule during COVID, things just didn't work out. But Senator Pamela Helming is here. She was first elected to the Senate in 2016 and now is in her third term representing the 54th Senate District that includes parts or all of 6 counties, stretching from Monroe County to CU County and down to Tompkins. That will possibly all change, and we'll talk about that at the end of the program. But we've asked her on today to give us an update on a number of items that are before the Senate and the legislature as a whole. Most importantly, the budget that has to be adopted in 2 weeks, or should be adopted in 2 weeks. We'll talk about 6 prisons that have been closed, at least one of which was in her district. We'll talk a little bit about the performance of the new governor, Kathy Hochul, as well as the proposals she has, this being the senator, to deal with the gas tax while we're having rising prices due to a number of outside indicators. We also may even talk a little bit about politics because she is the Senate Republican Campaign Committee Chair. So welcome back, and it's great to see you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. You're very decked out in your green.
Thank you, Guy. Happy St. Patty's Day to you as well.
So first, and I try to ask this of all of our guests, how did you and your family fare during COVID?
We fared very well, very well. Several of my family members did get COVID during the Christmas break, but everyone did well, mild symptoms, so very well.
And the last time you were here, you had a new baby granddaughter who was maybe 1 at that time.
Right.
And in the last 9 months, you had another addition.
Yes. So my granddaughter is now 3 years old. She just turned 3, and my grandson, my new grandson, Charles, he's 9 months old.
Congratulations. And they live where?
They live in North Carolina, just outside of Fort Bragg.
So your son-in-law, as we've said, you are a very strong proponent of those in active military service and veterans, and your son-in-law is doing what?
He is transitioning out of the Army. He's now at Duke University finishing up his MBA.
And so where did he go to college?
He went to school at the United States Military Academy at West Point. So he has an engineering degree that he wants to combine that with his MBA and find work now.
Great.
I guess having 2 children, it kind of shifts the priorities.
Well, congratulations on the second grandchild. So I want to, obviously the most important thing in the news right now is the budget. So we're about 14 days out. Today is the 17th as we tape this on St. Patrick's Day. Where is the legislature overall in the budget process?
So I'd say we're in the second phase of the budget process. We're at the stage where the legislature has just introduced their one-house budgets. The Senate one-house budget came out, as did the Assembly one-house budget. And for people who may be wondering, what are these one-house budgets? The way the process works is the governor introduces her spending plan with her priorities in it, and then about 30 days later, the legislature introduces their priorities. And the way I like to share with people or relate that, the one house are like when I was a kid, they used to still send out catalogs, right, around Christmas time. Yeah. You get the catalog and the marker and circle everything you would hope Santa would bring you. To me, that's what the one house budgets are like. The legislature throws everything that they possibly can into these budget bills, and then the negotiations begin.
So you'll find with your grandchildren that they will get Amazon catalogs they'll still be able to do with the toys. The governor released a $216 billion budget. It sounds like at least one of the one house bills is another $6 billion on top of it. So kind of combining both of those, whether you want to deal with the 216 or the $6 billion extra, is there anything in the budget you like?
So I'll just say the Senate One House budget proposed an additional $9 billion spending. This is a historic amount of spending, and we're talking about grandchildren and the future of our state. That's my primary concern with this level of spending, that we just continue to increase. What are we setting our children and our future generations for with this level of spending? There is no way to sustain it. No way.
So I'm assuming and again, it's only what, as Will Rogers used to say, it's only what I read in the newspapers. It sounds like New York is relying on a lot of federal money from the CARES Act and other COVID related, that is either one-time money or it runs out within a 3-year period. Is that?
That is correct.
So the spending that is being built in are not for like one shots necessary. These could be new programs.
Yes. Yep. It's a combination of both new programs that are being built into the budget and also one-shot boost to existing plans. But you did ask, was there anything in the budget that I like? I mean, with $225 billion worth of spending, there's something that everyone is going to like. I'm always a proponent for our schools and education, our hospitals, our rural hospitals. I feel that they need a tremendous amount of support after what they just experienced with COVID. So I'm happy to see that there are some measures to sustain our rural community hospitals. There is something else that I like in the budget, and that was back in 2019, then Governor Cuomo had buried in the budget a policy that created a new tax on broadband expansion fees. They were fiber optic taxes, and what it really did was it slowed down the build out of broadband services, again, especially in our rural communities.
And you represent a district that is, it's nice to say you've got Monroe County where Rochester is, but you have a lot of areas that are not on a system or are still dealing with AOL and dial-up.
And it's surprising too, even in the small cities that I represent, Auburn, Geneva, the city of Canandaigua, we have pockets that don't have reliable or affordable broadband services. So it's really important that we focus efforts to expand broadband. And after the 2019 budget was adopted, that new tax was added, I introduced legislation to repeal the broadband tax. And I'm so happy to say that in this year's Assembly One House budget, they used the exact language from my legislation. The Senate One House budget, they changed it up a little bit, but basically the bones of what I offered in my legislation.
And it became more and more apparent during COVID that broadband, especially for students, to hear school districts say, well, just go drive with your car to a parking lot in the district, a school parking lot to do your homework, didn't just cut it.
And I give a lot of credits to our school districts who they loaded, and I don't understand the technology, but they loaded whatever services were needed on the school bus. They would drive it out to certain areas so people could connect and get the internet connection that they needed. Also, I have to say thank you to our libraries, our public libraries, because boy, they really did everything they could to help facilitating getting internet connections out to people. I would see people sitting in the cars in their parking lots so their kids could do their homework.
So let's focus on education one piece, because it's important, because while you may not represent this in a later time, today you represent part of the city, about half of the city of Auburn. Yes. So I want to talk about education spending and specifically Auburn, but are you happy that education spending in the proposed budget is up?
I am happy that the education proposed spending is up. It's my understanding it's up about 3%. Every school district got about 3%. I do know for the Auburn City School District as well, there are additional individual lines in the budget, $270,000 for the Auburn schools to continue the school resource officer program. So I think that's good news.
And then there's always this issue about foundation aid with Auburn, and Jeff Perizzola will be sitting where you are a week from today, on Tuesday. And I know there is, I believe this is the second of 3 increases, so that to make Auburn whole, you'd still need the 2023-24 budget. First of all, am I correct on that?
I believe so.
The second issue, does it fix the formula?
No, the foundation aid formula still has not been fixed. And the challenge with the foundation aid formula is this, that, I have one school district that is asking that the wealth ratio index be changed, but you change it for one school district.
Everything's going to change.
Right. Then other school districts are harmed. 2 years ago, the majority started holding public hearings to talk about foundation aid formula, taking testimony from those in the education field on what needs to be done so that we can do a better job of more equitably distributing funding to our schools. But we're not there yet.
So any new aid for community colleges? I know there's been some question about keeping, and I only ask that because guess where we're sitting as we're taping this. How are community colleges making out in the budgets?
Community colleges are in a great spot in the Senate One House budget. So in the budget process, we started to talk about that. We're in the negotiation phase now. So this is where it's really important for community colleges and others who like what's in the one house budgets to really continue to be strong advocates for keeping that funding going.
So the phase before this was hearings. So did you participate in hearings?
I did.
So
I did.
what was your assigned hearing area?
So you're assigned hearings based on the committees that you serve in. I'm the ranking member of the Housing and Community Development Committee, so I participate in the housing hearings. I'm also the ranking member on insurance, and I serve on a whole host of committees from agriculture
So those
to
you would
tourism
serve in
to
on those budget hearings. So one of the pieces, and this, I'm going in a different direction, not where it's starting, but to-go alcohol, and was a big issue during COVID, where restaurants, many of them in your district, would package food and they would package cocktails for people as long as they could identify that they were of legal drinking age, and they would pay for them. So that ended last year because there's a law against it, and then the governor seems to have put it back in as a policy change. Am I correct on that in general?
Yes.
So I know there's some question right now about whether or not it's still in one of these one house bills. First of all, do you think it's a good idea?
I do think it's a good idea. I think the alcohol to go is really what literally saved some of our restaurants during the pandemic when they were mandated to close or they were mandated to be partially opened. I think the alcohol to go, along with the soup served with the food to go, was really what kept them in business.
You couldn't just go in and say, I want 4 martinis. You needed to order your rum and Coke with tacos or something if that restaurant had a liquor license.
Exactly. And I would say this too, that there are many businesses now that are beginning to recover from the pandemic, but I believe that restaurants still, the hospitality industry as a whole still has a ways to go. And this is one way that we could help them by allowing them to continue to provide alcohol to go.
So what's interesting to me is, and forgetting aside what your particular support of to go is, to me this is a policy issue. And I know one of the complaints, especially of the last 2 governors, not necessarily Kathy Hochul, because this is her budget, is they would put all this policy stuff in there. And is that the right way to go, or should there be these, why aren't they doing standalone policy recommendations?
I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I just brought up the example of the new broadband tax that was buried in the 2019 budget. Had we held public hearings on it, took public input, I think the governor could have provided better direction there. And again, we see the same thing happening with this budget. There's extended producer responsibility law. There are so many other policies that are tucked into the budget. My personal view is that those need to be debated. We need to be more transparent. And that is a little bit frustrating with Governor Hochul, is that she spoke when she first became governor so much about being more open, being more transparent.
So she's not changing that policy in her budget.
No.
So do you see the budget being adopted on time?
I do.
Is that important?
I think it's very important. Although I would say it's equally important that we have a responsible budget.
So you will vote on several different budget bills.
Yes.
5 or 6 of them, I think, altogether. Yes. At this point, do you see you're supporting any of them?
It depends on what's in them. I really have to take a close look to see what's in each bill.
So one of the things that is separate from all of this is, and let me ask you a general question to start with. New York State gets some revenue from fuel taxes, correct?
Yes.
Do they charge it per gallon?
It's charged per gallon.
So you would like to either stop the gas tax at this time because we're having some higher prices, whether you assign it to inflation or what's going over in Ukraine right now. You would like to cap it, stop it, or revoke it?
Any of the above.
Okay.
Listen, I just want to provide some relief to the people in New York State. I, in my 5 years in office, have never gotten as many calls as I'm getting now from people who are struggling, whether it's farmers now with the cost of the fuel to fill their equipment, whether it's the cost of heating fuel for folks.
So there's gas taxes on all of those. There's some type of fuel tax on all of that.
Since last October, I have been calling for a pause on the state gas taxes. So the American Petroleum Institute says that New York State charges 46 cents per gallon. I've been calling on New York State to pause that. Let's come
So
up
not
with
a
a certain
permanent-
not a permanent,
Right.
no.
So, okay.
And I will just suggest this too. There are people who say, well, if we pause the gas tax, we're going to hurt our local governments, right? Because their CHIPS funding, that's the consolidated highway funding, the money they get for their roads and bridges is linked to the gas tax. That's what helps
Well,
fund
many
it.
of these communities also have their own gas tax.
Exactly. Yep.
So the other item that occurred in the news in the last 10 days, unfortunately, has been 6 prisons have been closed. I believe at least one of them is in your district, or are there more?
One.
So first of all, why did this occur?
Again, this was policy that was buried in the state budget, right? Governor Cuomo put in
So this
policy
was
that
part
allowed
of
the governor.
the current year's budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So part of policy, the governor, I don't know that Governor Cuomo he may have left office before he implemented this, but Governor Hochul did in November assign 6 prisons to be closed, correct?
Yes. And so the language allowing the governor to close the prisons, it may have been included in a budget prior to last year. It was early, because last year, I believe, or 2 years ago, Governor Cuomo also closed, was it 4 prisons?
Right.
Now Governor Cuomo's closing 6 prisons. So this has been going on for some time. And with Willard closing, it's a tremendous concern for the community.
So those who may not know what Willard is.
Willard is a drug treatment, substance abuse center. It allowed for alternatives to incarceration. At least that's the way I explained it. I'm not sure that's technically correct, but it was a good program.
You're not on Crime and Commissions Committee, are you?
Not anymore.
Not
no.
anymore. Okay.
But it's a good program, and it's one that the governor said, we need more drug treatment facilities. So it boggles my mind why we would close the one that we have.
So what happens to those employees, first of all?
So the corrections officers and the union employees were all offered alternative positions in other areas. So they've all been moved. Willard closed last Thursday. Non-union employees, I've been told, have been offered alternative positions as well.
And what happens to those properties? Because we've been hearing about, has the state been able to sell any prison they've closed?
I'm not sure. I do know Butler was closed in 2014. That's located in Wayne County, and there's been no action on that. But I do want to mention that Willard, to me, and I've sent a letter to the governor and so many others, working with local leaders just to call attention to, this is a really extremely unique property located on the shores of Seneca Lake. We have so many phenomenal opportunities to create tax generating revenue from that site, to create job opportunities from that site, and also to increase public access to one of the most beautiful lakes in the Finger Lakes.
I want to ask one other corrections question, because I think you do get to vote on this. The governor has nominated Anthony, and I don't think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Annucci, to be the Commissioner of Corrections. He had held this position for 9 years, but wasn't official. First of all, why is that?
I'm not sure why. I have heard, I'm not 100% sure on this, but that many of the commissioners' pay structure caps out. But if you're an acting commissioner, it doesn't fall under that cap.
Okay.
Right.
So there seems to be some bipartisan opposition to his permanent appointment. Am I correct on that?
No.
So
interesting, right? You would think it would be bipartisan, but it's actually not. We were supposed to vote on the commissioner's appointment a couple of weeks ago, but it was pulled because they couldn't get enough support from the majority side. So I believe most of the folks on the Republican side were going to vote down. But
so you're supportive of his? Are you supportive of his being appointed?
I am not.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. I want to add, and this is changing because in the last 5 hours there's been a news story in the New York Post that we were talking about, that the governor's now come up with a bail reform plan. 2019 there was a bail reform process put in there. I say bail reform with quotes around it because some people do not call it reform. They call it worse things. First of all, did you support that in 2019?
I did not, no.
So what's the problem with it, and what do you think needs to be done?
So I think that we did need change, right? It didn't make sense that people who could afford to get out of jail were able to do so, and that those who couldn't afford it had to sit in jail waiting for their trial, their hearing, whatever it was. So I think we did need to make some changes. But I think when you look at what has been done, even under Governor Hochul's leadership, bail reform, the discretionary powers that have been taken away, the HALT Act, the Less is More, which Governor Hochul signed into law this year, which it takes away some of the parole, some of the actions that parole officers can take. I think you take all of that together, and we have really empowered criminals in this state.
So the short question here is, while the governor might unveil a new set of proposals today on the 17th, there does not seem to be support among the Democratic leadership. Who comes to mind is your fellow Senator Gianaris of New York, to move this anyway. Do you think there is going to be bail reform?
I don't know. I think that's a great question. I thought maybe there'd be something tucked in the budget. Obviously, there wasn't. It's not only Senator Gianaris, who is the chair of the Senate Democratic Campaign Committee, but also the majority leader of the Senate, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who said that they are not going to change bail reform. But I think that they see, after last November's local elections, they see that bail reform.
Eric, Mayor of New York, has been a very strong proponent.
And on Long Island, they had some significant changes, all tied to bail reform legislation and the positions people have taken. I thought it was kind of interesting. I haven't had a chance yet today to read what the governor's put out, but I believe earlier today our former governor, Cuomo, put something out saying that, challenging the governor, that she didn't do anything yet on bail reform, and that would be something that he would address.
In case he might be running. We might have time for that, but I want to come to elections, but I want to ask you about something germane to your district,
okay.
And that's the DRI, the Downtown Revitalization. You do have a couple of municipalities that are beneficiaries of this money, correct?
I do, yes. It's kind of interesting. A lot of them follow along the Route 5 and 20 corridor. Obviously, Auburn has been the recipient of the DRI. And between the entire DRI team, the city of Auburn, and the county, they have just done an absolutely incredible job. The Community College Culinary Center, there have been a number of businesses that have been revamped and reopened in the downtown area, the Auburn Public Theater, just really great success stories.
Would you like to see that money continue?
I would like to see that money continue.
And is it in the budget? Do you know if it's in the budget?
It is in the budget.
How about these regional economic development councils? Because that was the precursor to DRIs, where they would have these competitive, I know some people called them Hunger Games, leaving that out for a second, especially since nobody mostly reads those books anymore because they're so old. Is that idea of keeping Red Sea money still should be a budget priority?
I think helping our communities definitely should be a priority. I am happy that in the budget they've recognized that some of our smaller communities in our rural areas can't necessarily compete with some of the larger small cities and others for this DRI money. So there is specific money in the budget that is lined out for rural improvements, if you will. My concern with all of these lines in the budget, there's just not enough detail to understand how the money will be allocated.
So the other item that's in the news this week is the Buffalo Bills. I thought we had gotten rid of football season because most people are talking about baseball now, but the Bills Stadium seems to be slated for some portion of state funding for their $859 billion. First of all, should the state be involved in something like that?
I think the Buffalo Bills are a major economic revenue generator, not only for that region, but for our entire state. So I do support some level of support. I have not seen any proposals or any funding. Again, going back to the governor talking about she wants to increase transparency and openness. I saw none of that with the negotiations for the Buffalo Bills Stadium.
And municipal leaders, including Auburn's, have now all said, well, wait a second, if Buffalo's going to get some piece of 859, we need money, whether it's for Falcon Park or other. Should all these other communities also get a piece of the pie?
They should absolutely have an opportunity to apply and be considered for funding.
So my bigger question is, where's the money come from?
And that's my point. Everybody wants more and more and more and more, right? But we already pay some of the highest taxes in the nation. So it's got to stop somewhere. It's got to stop. So,
we got about 3-4 minutes left. The governor's been in office about 7 months now. How's she doing?
I think, I was so excited to have a governor from Western New York, from upstate, and I was really excited to have our first female governor. And I had high hopes, high expectations. A little disappointed that, the first thing she did was appoint a lieutenant governor who was instrumental in the bail reform and the pro-criminal package of bills that have been introduced and passed over the last couple of years. I was excited when she started talking about being more transparent and open with decision making. I have not seen that. There has been no communication whatsoever between the governor's office and the Senate Minority Conference. None.
So when the idea was when Andrea Stewart Cousins, the Senate Majority Leader, when she was the Minority Leader, wanted to be in the room, they're not letting the minorities in the room at this stage.
Absolutely not.
The
Guy, can I just mention on the budget too?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a very good point. And when the Senate One House budget came out, the spending plan, like we talked about, $225 billion or whatever it was, the Senate majority said to the minority conference, to us, this is going to be voted on as a resolution. So the policy allows a 30-minute debate on a resolution. Imagine that, 30 minutes to debate a $225 billion spending plan that we had less than 24 hours to review. They extended it graciously to give us 2 hours. It's ridiculous.
So I want to ask, we got 2 minutes left. I want to ask a little bit about politics only because you are representing currently the 54th Senate District under the proposal that is now out there or that people are circulating petitions for. They're due in early April. You would lose the city of Auburn. Am I correct on that?
You are
correct. You would just have the top, how many towns?
4 towns in Cuba County.
So this was supposed to go to an independent redistricting, and we don't have a lot of time for this, but go to an independent redistricting commission to divide up these new districts. What happened?
That IRC, the Independent Redistricting Commission, had political appointees on it and could not come to an agreement on the maps.
So right now you have new maps, and I know almost everybody seems to be paying attention to the congressional races for the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th congressional races. They don't seem to be generating to the Assembly and the Senate, but you're all up this year. Is this your current numbers in the Senate are 43 in the majority for the Democrats, 20 in the minority. Does this make it tougher? Have these new district lines made it tougher? And I know you have the hat of being the Senate Republican Committee Chair, Campaign Committee Chair.
Yes.
Is it tougher right now to retain seats or pick up seats?
I would say that these maps have definitely been gerrymandered by the Democrats. They've created 2 new seats in the New York City area, as well as taking 3 Republican seats and putting Republicans in the same district.
So one of them who happens to represent Southern Cuyahoga County, south of Owasco.
Senator Peter Oberacher is now in the same Senate district as Senator Jim Tedesco.
So are you seeking re-election?
I am seeking re-election.
And I ask this because I've asked this before we offered an invitation to you. We've asked a number of people, and nobody can give us an answer. At this stage, do you have an opponent?
Not that I've heard of.
Okay, so petitions are going around now.
Yeah.
They have to be done by April, and we'll know then. So if you have an opponent, we'd love to have you back in November for a forum. You've participated in the past. Love to have you come back on to do an update from Albany. We appreciate your time coming to Cayuga.
Thank you so much.
And congratulations on the new grandson.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our guest has been New York State Senator Pamela Helming. We want to thank her again for joining us and talking about her work in Albany and what the Senate is working on. We'll return in just a second with another Inside Government show with Assemblyman Brian McElroy, who will represent some of the same land that she will represent in other northern Cuyahoga County if those maps stand by. And we'll talk about what's going on in the other chamber in the state. We'll be back with two shows on Tuesday. Auburn Superintendent of Schools Jeff Parazola will be back in to give us an update on several items that have occurred in the district since he was here about a month ago. Those include the removal of the mask mandate, the arrest of a school resource officer, and the vote of the Board of Education on a book that has been questioned for its appropriateness on the shelves of the high school library. We'll then have Mr. Lewis of the Auburn Doubledays to talk about the upcoming second season of the Doubledays here. And over the next several weeks, we'll have Legislative Chairman David Gould on, Auburn City Manager Jeff Dygert, the Executive Director of the Auburn Housing Authority, Stephanie Hutchinson, as well as Dr. Adam Epler of the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council. And we hope to have back, we were not able to have her on Tuesday, but the YMCA's Camp Director, Melissa Kanga Cartner, to talk about the Y Camp. And at the end of the month, we'll at the beginning of May, we'll have our annual Auburn Enlarged School District Forum on May 3rd. Petitions can be picked up starting this Monday if you want to run. Before we go, though, please let us know if you have any questions for either guests on Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page. You can email us at cozguytho@aol.com or send us to Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. I'm Guy Cosentino for KU Community College. I want to thank you for watching. Have a good night. Have a great tomorrow. Stick around for the assemblyman. Be safe. Either get vaccinated or boosted or wear a mask.